Now, today's guest is an author and an illustrator. He brings us a moving and thoughtful book based on his own experience. Ross Boone is with us this morning. Again, Ross, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great, Doug. I'm so happy to have this opportunity.
You've got a very interesting nickname. It makes all the sense in the world, but I'm going to ask you to explain it. Some of your books are written under the name of Ross Boone. Tell the folks about that. Where'd that come from?
Right. Okay, so my real name given by my parents is Ross Boone. But I remember back in high school, some cute girl said, "Hey, did you know if you say your name fast, it sounds like Raw Boone?" And that kind of stuck in my mind when I was starting to be a writer, thinking about a pen name. And I thought, that's pretty intriguing, that name. Very, it has some imagery in there that's kind of intriguing. So I went with it, and it's been a great mnemonic device for people, too. They're like, "Oh, you're that guy with the Raw Spoon, because it sounds like your name. Ha ha." So.
Well, it works, and I bet you the gal was pretty cute, too, wasn't she?
She was real cute.
Yeah, that works. Now, you, as we said, you've got 5 books out there in print, but you bring us your very personal story this morning about a special trip to Africa and all the stuff that you learned from that. Now, the title of this book, Signs of a New Kingdom, it's now in its 3rd edition. Tell us a bit about your book, would you?
Yeah, I'd love to. So most of my books are fiction, but this time my dad had been going to Ethiopia for missions trips where they were training and bringing medical aid to Ethiopia. And he had asked me every year for like a dozen years, "Come on over with us, Ross. I'd love to show you what I do." And I just I couldn't figure out how my mission in life, which is to share my message with the people of my country and my language in my culture, it couldn't see how that would align with spending a bunch of money to go overseas to try to help Ethiopians. And I was also hearing that these Ethiopians were doing miracles and had this amazing faith that I was struggling to have here in America. And then, though, my uncle, who was my dad's twin brother, had a heart attack, surprising out of the blue heart attack, and passed away. And I thought, wow, I need to soak up as much time as I can with my dad. I don't know how much longer I'll have him here. And when he asked me to go to Ethiopia with him that year, I thought, well, this is finally time. And I thought about it and realized maybe there is a way that I can still minister to my culture, in my language, in my nation, by going over there and recording the stories of these miracles, putting them in a book, and bringing that back and giving it to my people. And I did a Kickstarter, and a lot of people got involved. It got fully funded to help me get over there to fund the trip, and in exchange, I delivered a book to them full of 200 pages of miracles. So.
Wow. Now, that your uncle passing away, that's a tragedy, but that really kind of brought things into perspective to you, all the times that you had missed. Isn't that right?
It sure did. It sure did. And it's interesting how some of the hard situations in our life can turn out to move us in a new direction, which is actually one of the questions that I asked one of the Ethiopian pastors that was seeing miracles. I asked him, why suffering? And he said something to this effect. When I lost my uncle, it started a chain reaction of not only this book getting done, but I did a kid's book about dealing with grief, about 2 tender-hearted donkeys who are best friends, and one of those donkeys gets taken away. And my uncle and his wife had a couple of donkeys named Squire and Daniel, which is the name of the book. And that book came out of this experience, too, of losing my uncle.
Now, your dad is a petroleum engineer out in Colorado, I believe.
That's right.
But these trips weren't business at all. They were there as pure mission trips. Is that right?
That's right. He just has a passion to see these people get to know God better. And he has some friends that Ethiopia is specifically their passion. So he goes over with them, and all this crazy stuff is happening because of it.
Okay. Now, this mission trip, the several of them that he went on, they were assembled of very highly educated people. In other words, he had folks that could help in situations and make suggestions as they, as you referred to, planted churches. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so there's different skill sets that were brought over. Some are just highly trained pastors who have been running churches in America for years and years. And one of the other main skill sets, was a medical team. So they brought doctors and nurses of all different types over there to deliver that skill as well to help them. So it wasn't just health for the soul that they were trying to deliver, but health for the body as well as engineers like my dad and some of the other people who are more capable of just helping the Ethiopian communities develop to a place where they have clean water, running water, have just the needs that they need to get by and help develop their country to a more comfortable, life-giving place.
Again, the name of the book is Signs of a New Kingdom. It's by Ross Boone. Ross, where can our listeners find out more about you and your book?
Yeah, so my website has links to all of this stuff, as well as links to following my Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, and it is at rawsboone.com, R-A-W, Boone.com.
And that's one word, right?
That's one word,
Ross,
right? Yeah.
Ross, okay, very good. All
Ross
right.
Boone. And if to find the information about this book specifically, there's a link that says books. You can click there, scroll down until you see this book, click on that, and it'll take you to a page where I have some of the video interviews of the pastors. So if, along with this book, that you can get from a link that will take you to Amazon from that page, if you want a supplement and you want to see the faces and hear the voices of these pastors, the video interviews are on my website.
That's outstanding. Now, you interviewed many people while you were over there in the country, and I want to talk about you a little bit before we go back to that. I want to go more into the interviews for sure. But you're a mechanical engineer by education, and yet you chose to follow that with another degree. Tell us about that. What motivated you to go to another direction?
Yeah, ever since I was little, probably the main thing that defined my life was my creativity. So in high school, when my career counselor said, hey, you have pretty good math scores, you should go to engineering school, and my dad and my uncle and lots of other people in my family had been engineers, I thought, okay, that makes sense. But the whole time during engineering school, I was writing books and drawing pictures and doing inventing, and it was just not creative enough for me. And then when I graduated and my friends were getting jobs in like water purification or power plants or cement factories, I was like, I think I need something else. And I found out about a degree called industrial design, which basically combines art with engineering to do product design. So I did another bachelor's in that. So 3 years later, I come out having these 2 degrees, and luckily they work well together. But that let me get a job designing patio furniture and outdoor decor for about 8 years, and that's what brought me down to Atlanta. But the whole time, in the background still, I had been writing and drawing. So that has just been a big skill set that I poured into and really just made a major part of my life now.
Oh, yeah. Where is it you went to school, Ross?
The Colorado School of Mines. It was started as a mining school, and then after that degree, the Metropolitan State College of Denver for industrial design.
Okay. So you're sitting there with 2 degrees in engineering, basically. The items that they sound interesting as all get out. Now, were they designed for a company that you worked for, or were these on your own?
Yeah, I was hired by a company to work for them full time, and it was a blast. We would pump out sometimes 10 products a day, and that was just the concepts. We would have to render out these concepts. But it ranged anything from bird feeders to wind chimes to a patio chair to patio umbrellas, and it kind of ran the gamut of really creative artistic things like garden gnomes. I drew garden gnomes to really technical things like patentable patio umbrella mechanisms.
Now, what's the shelf life? These things were available where, like in garden centers, Home Depots, I assume. Where were they available?
Yeah, some of my stuff has been in Home Depot or Lowe's or Ace. Yeah, I'm not sure if any of it is still there. There was a watering can. I've seen it all over the nation when I go visit people. I'm like, hey, I designed that watering can. But it's this green watering can. It's kind of boxy with rounded corners with a black removable tip. So if you have one of those in your on your patio right now, it might be mine. It might be the one I designed.
Okay. All right. The writing, you've always been interested in writing. Was that while you were in school as well, or were you primarily focused on the engineering degrees?
No, I was definitely writing or trying to write in school. I remember I had this huge roll of paper that I had put up on my wall and had Post-it notes that whenever I had time, I would stick these Post-it notes with ideas on this timeline that ran across the paper. So, yes, I was definitely writing or dreaming of writing or planning a book while I was in engineering school.
Okay. We mentioned your father. Your dad's an engineer out in Colorado still. How about the rest of your family? Did you have brothers and sisters as you were growing up?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have two blood brothers. I'm the oldest, and one's in California doing architecture. Another one's in Idaho doing engineering, and they have little families, married with 2 kids each. And my mom passed away about 10 years ago, I think it is now, and my dad remarried, and my stepmom, or we call her our bonus mom, brought with her 4 adopted Korean kids. So it is a big change to our family, and they were about 10 years younger than us brothers. So it's like my dad started over again. And when we go home for the holidays, it's a mess. It's a beautiful mess. It's so many people of so many different types getting along, loving each other, celebrating, and it's different than my life out here in Atlanta, where it's just me. I have one roommate, and I sit in my quiet house doing design all day and illustration and writing.
Well, that's true. You illustrate your own work, and you also contract out and illustrate for other writers. Which came first in your interest level, or what you realized your talents were? Was it the writing or the illustrating?
Oh, I hadn't thought about that. They both started really young. Probably drawing, maybe even before I knew how to write. I remember when I was really young, my mom saw all these pictures that I was drawing, and she threw an art show for me, for my neighbors. So she basically helped me get a bunch of these drawings of like sharks jumping up out of the water, eating cars, and all sorts of little boy things like that, up on matted on paper and hung up around our house, and then invited all of our neighbors over to view the art show, view Ross's big debut. And so I think ever since then I have been drawing. Now, when I was able to tell a story or write a story, that came, I almost said it came naturally, but writing has been more difficult for me, but it's still been a passion. I've slugged along trying to portray these ideas that have so inspired me. And, if anybody out there is wondering what skill set they should pour into, what career, if they're trying to figure out a new career or whatever, I think there's a couple ways to look at what we're built to do and what we're built to pursue. For me, writing was more difficult. I think I just wasn't given the microchip in my head that naturally writes as easily. So it takes probably twice as long for me to read something or write something. But then the drawing part of it comes pretty naturally to me. And I like it, so I get to practice it a lot. I get to do it a lot. And just a combination of... Go ahead.
I was going to say there's probably a number of authors out there that are looking for an illustrator. How could an author get in touch with you to find out if you guys could work together?
Great question. I would love to work together. So my email is ross.boone@rawspoon.com. So that's my real name with a period in between the first and last. ross.boone@rawspoon.com. My pen name.
Excellent.
Is the ending.
I got another question for you.
Okay.
Where did the artistic talent come from? You mentioned your mom that you lost, and we're sorry for your loss. But your dad is an engineer as well. Could you trace it back? Who also had the artistic talents in your family?
I don't know. I've thought about this before. I don't know anybody who's a writer or a drawer in my parents or my aunts and uncles or grandparents. So I'm not sure where it came from. I know I have a cousin who's really artistic. She runs a graphic design agency. You know, my uncle, the one that passed away, dabbled in some art stuff. I remember he gave us a gift of like a paint or a drawn picture of our house one year. So maybe it came from my uncle or something related to that.
Well, either way, you're a very talented fella. We're going to get ready to take a break here in just a minute. We're going to come back and talk a great deal more about your book and your other work. And before we go into the break, I want to say something to my friends in the Atlanta area. This coming May 12th and 13th, the Atlanta Writers Club, under the direction of George Weinstein, will once again sponsor the Atlanta Writers Conference. Now, this is going to be the 16th edition of this great conference, and it's going to be held again at the Westin Atlanta Airport Hotel. Again, those dates are May 12th and 13th, and that's of 2017. So if you need information, I want you to go to their website, which is www.atlantawritersconference.com, and get more details there. That's coming up May 12th and 13th, a great Atlanta Writers Club Writers Conference. I know you'll want to take part in that. And folks, we're here this morning with Ross Boone. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back with more after these messages.
Hi there. This is Gerald Gillis, author of the suspense novel Dare Not Blink. You're listening to the Doug Dahlgren Show on Artist First Radio.
When 4 members of Congress all die within 4 months, each of their deaths appears to be from natural causes. But when mysterious messages begin to appear in the form of quotations from long-dead revolutionary heroes, one reporter sets out to prove the existence of a serial killer. His search discovers dark secrets and an assassin shielded by people who need the very services that only he can provide. The Sun Silas Rising, a novel by Doug Dahlgren, on Kindle or paperback through Amazon.com.
Hi, this is retired Captain William G. Haneke, author of Trust Not, a memoir about my experiences as a military advisor in Vietnam and the treatment I received following severe combat wounds. You can get copies of this book on Amazon.com, either in softcover or ebook form. And now you're listening to the Doug Dahlgren Show on Artist First Radio.
You are listening to the Doug Dahlgren Show on the Artist First Radio Network. All past broadcasts can be listened to free and on demand. Visit the archive sections at artistfirst.com. Now, back to your host, Doug Dahlgren.
And thank you again, Z-Man. It's good to hear that music again. That music is written especially for us by a good friend of mine named Wig Nelson down in Florida. And Wig, hope you're listening. Appreciate your work. And we're going to have you back on one day. We're here this morning on Artist First Radio. We're talking with Ross Boone. He goes by the handle Ross Boone. His book, Signs of a New Kingdom, is about a trip that he took with his father and a bunch of other missionaries to Ethiopia. And we're going to get back into that in just a second, but I know he won't mind if I take 1 minute here and recognize some very special listeners that we're quite proud of here at Artist First Radio. First of all, our uniformed service men and women They're stationed all around this world, working hard to protect us each and every day. Freedom's not free, my friends. It's bought and paid for daily by these brave folks, and we certainly want to remember and thank them for all that they do. Also, I want to remember the first responders. These are folks who are a lot closer. We might overlook them, and you don't want to do that. They're here in our own private cities and towns where we live all over this country. That's the police, fire, rescue personnel, the ones that run to our aid when we need their help. They don't know who we are. They don't know what color we are or what religion we profess. They simply want to help, putting themselves in harm's way if necessary. So remember that and thank them when you see them, okay? Now, we want to get back to Ross's book here. Signs of a New Kingdom is really a memoir and a documentary, sort of. Now, Ross, what other genres do you write in?
You know, my first passion is fiction, and I'm working on a epic allegory fantasy series that basically really loosely chronicles the stages of the Christian walk. That's where I found a lot of meaning, and I've explored a lot in that direction. So I'm writing and illustrating that book series. But I've done kids' books and done this nonfiction book, and I do a lot of blogs as well. Every couple of days I try to put a blog out there.
Okay. Is there a particular genre that you prefer, or have you even thought about that?
Mm-hmm. You know, I really find the most meaning doing this novel series that I'm working on, the fantasy novel. And I think it's because I'm just finding metaphors to kind of approximate what I've experienced and what has most inspired me. And I just hope that, kind of like this is my masterpiece, that people will be just as touched by this novel series as I was touched when it inspired me to do it.
Okay. Now, you mentioned a little earlier Kickstarter is helping you with this book. Now, tell the folks that may not know, what is Kickstarter and what do they do?
Yeah, Kickstarter is great. So a lot of projects need some upfront cost before it can get going. And it may be a really great idea, but the person who's trying to do it needs that upfront money. So Kickstarter is a website. You can go to Kickstarter.com, I believe, and put your project online and kind of ask everybody you know to support you, and they can donate to this webpage to kind of get you that initial money egg or thing to start on so that you can begin your project. And then in exchange, you deliver to them the product from your efforts. So in this case, the cost to go over to Ethiopia was the big chunk of money, but I was intent on delivering high-quality product from that. So when someone would give a small donation, whether it be $10, $15, $25, I would give them different packages, like I'll send you this book plus 2 of my other books, or this book, and you'll have a chance to write a what do you call those, a memorial page or something in the back of this book. And they can get in at different levels for these different projects and help fund the project.
Wonderful. So you had this whole idea and you approached Kickstarter prior to even going over to Ethiopia. Is that what I mean?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. All right.
And,
now the trip. Go ahead.
It was, sorry to interrupt you. It was as much about involving my friends in this project as it was earning the money to go on it. So Kickstarter is a great platform just to let people know what you're doing. And, you know, in a lot of cases, it makes sense if someone's going on a missions trip for them to ask for money from their friends and family to help them go overseas for a trip. But I thought it was important to let people know and be able to be part of this trip, but also get something in return. I wanted to deliver something back to them. So Kickstarter can be used for situations like that as well.
Excellent. Now, this particular trip, this mission trip to Ethiopia was several years ago. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 2014.
Okay. And you mentioned that initially you had turned this down several years in a row, and then the death of your uncle, which was a tragic thing, that really turned you around, made you change your mind. Did something in your religion, your personal faith, caused the earlier reluctance, or how do you describe what it was that held you back?
Yeah, great question. So, I've had this passion for writing and drawing, and I felt like maybe God has given me these skills to write things from my culture in my language. I remember sitting in the hot tub one time back at home. Whenever I go back home, it's a great time for me to ponder my life, and I just sit in the hot tub thinking about things. And I was remembering how one of the prophets, Isaiah or someone, basically wrote in his book that, like, I have been designated a prophet to my people of my language, and I had just read that, and I was asking God about this, and I felt like that applied to me too. So my mission, I feel like, is to help my people of my language and culture and nation become closer to God. So that's what held me back, and I thought, how can me going over to Ethiopia and spending a lot of money to get there really helped me fulfill my mission? So I just didn't feel the calling at the time.
Well, now, did the trip itself, did that change your view of mission trips as a whole?
Yes and no. So I think each person needs to be sensitive to their own calling. For me, I still think my mission field is my people who struggle with faith and trying to figure out culture and Christianity here in America. And other people, yeah, maybe they have a different mission field that isn't as sensational as going overseas. But I would say God is a dynamic God, and he's flexible, so we should be flexible. And I think if God says, hey, I need you to adjust your plans, I have something you didn't expect, go with it. I'd say go with it. And in my case, it definitely helped. And it was just a little bit of extra creative thinking to help me figure out how not only to help the people over there by giving them a platform to tell their stories in Ethiopia, but also help my people back here in America, which is my first and primary mission field.
How long were you guys over there?
Oh, I think it was 10 days, and a couple days of that on either side was travel, or about a day on either side.
But in country 10 days?
Yes.
Okay. Were you basically in one location, or did you move around Ethiopia a good deal?
Yeah, it was one location on the trip out there. So we landed in Addis Ababa and drove about 2 hours into this hill country. And on the way, we stopped once at a church, and there was a really interesting miracle story that happened there while we were there. But then we went on to a location in Gojo where it was kind of our hub where all the pastors came there for training, and we stayed there, and that's where I did all of my interviews.
You mentioned miracles, and the book talks a little bit about witchcraft and things like that. What were your impressions? Was there a culture shock when you got there, comparing Ethiopia's faith to our systems and cultures here?
Oh my gosh, yes. Now, Addis Ababa was a little bit more, it was a lot more developed and a little bit more like the United States, so that wasn't as much of a shock. Or, it's similar to other countries you might go to that are developed countries. But out in the rural areas, it was totally different. It was like stepping back into the New Testament. Like the same things that they were dealing with, like getting water at a well and carrying sticks on their back. And so that stuff was similar to the Old Testament and totally different than what I'm used to in America. But then also the faith was so much different. It's almost like when we become dependent on our technologies, we become less dependent on God. So over there, when they don't have that stuff to rely on, they have to rely on spirituality because they just do not have the power outside of themselves to bring more water to their crops when their crops are drying out, or they don't have the technology of good healthcare or doctors that have the right machines. So they rely on going to a witch doctor or coming to, in these situations, these evangelical pastors that would pray for them, and a lot of times bring these miracles.
The witch doctors you mentioned, now, how did they react to your presence? Did they withdraw and move away, or were they there trying to interfere with what you were doing?
I didn't interact with any of the witch doctors. I'm not sure if I saw any of them. My time was mostly gathering data from the pastors who had gone out there and experienced these things, but their stories were very antagonistic with the witch doctors. A lot of times they would come into the pastors, these evangelical pastors would come into a village, and the witch doctor who was in control there would confront them, and there would be this sort of spiritual and physical battle, sometimes like miracles going back and forth of like magic. It sounded crazy and just like out of my comfort zone, but it just attested to this strange spiritual warfare that's going on in the background, and it may be going on in America, but it's just a lot harder to see if it is.
Oh, well, the culture differences really had to have played a big role in that. And I'm sure you had to be very careful. You could get in trouble real quick over there if you said the wrong thing to the wrong guy.
Yeah, I bet you could. I was with the missionaries, kind of isolated from the actual danger, but the stories I heard from these from the missionaries were they were in it. They were like, man, they would go out in the morning not sure if they would come back alive that day. Some of them got stoned, and they survived, and they call another pastor and said, send in reinforcements, basically, I need help. Other ones would, so there was a lot of antagonism. Whenever they would move into a region to try to tell them about Jesus, they would, a lot of times just the village didn't want to change. They were in their ways, and when someone would come in preaching this new power, they would send out, so there are stories in my book of, they call them gangsters, so I'm guessing it's just like kind of the renegades of the town sent out in groups to sort of eliminate the trouble. So there were stories like one of the men confronted one of the pastors with a machete or something, I think, and the pastor basically just said, you aren't going to hurt me. I love you. I love you. I love you. And the man could not move his arm with the machete, and it led through this funny chain reaction of eventually that man came to Christ and brought his family as well. So it's really interesting. It's like a movie, like a fantasy movie, really.
Now, your book, and again, folks, we're talking about Signs of a New Kingdom by Ross Boone. Ross, let's take a good spot right here and tell the folks again, where can they find this book or find out more about it and you?
Yeah, thanks, Doug. Yeah, I try to funnel all of the inquiries and all of the visits and all the questions towards my website. It's rawspoon.com, RAWSPOON.com. There you can find links to all of my different books, including the video interviews of this book, that you can watch the actual faces, hear the voices of the people that I interviewed, and on the heading is where you can click over and follow me on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook.
Now, the book chronicles before and going over and being there, and it also talks about the interviews. You mentioned the interviews earlier. How many folks did you actually sit down and interview? And what I'm curious about, was this something that you came up with while you were there, or was that a plan all along? I know you were going to write the book, but did you plan on doing these personal interviews, or was that an idea that came to you while you were there?
No, it was definitely part of the planning process. I thought, what can I contribute? Oh, I need to gather these stories. How can I gather these stories? So I sent word over to the people who organized the trip and said, I will only be useful to you probably if you can help me set up these interviews. So that was basically the precursor to me going. I set up I figured out basically how to do recording, got some recording equipment, and but yeah, then I interviewed 6 Ethiopian pastors, I think it was, and then a couple of the Americans that had been part of this movement from the beginning as well.
Okay. What type of folks did you look for to talk to in these interviews?
Yeah, so the American pastors, basically my liaisons, were, I asked them, who should I talk to? And they said, oh, we know a guy. This one guy, you got to hear his stories. So all these pastors were near the village for the training that they were getting from our team anyway. So the other Americans there that knew which ones of these pastors, just from their experience, they knew which ones of these pastors had amazing stories. They would send them to me where I was waiting to interview them. And so it was basically the other Americans who had heard through the past, I think it was 10 or 12 years of this movement developing. They had heard all these stories from these different pastors, and so they were just like, oh, this one needs to be written down. Go talk to Ross. That's how we gathered the people.
Now, how many were reluctant at first or totally reluctant to even talk to you?
They were really humble. I didn't get to see the ones who, maybe turned down the opportunity. I'm not sure if there were any. And some of them, it was really cool. They just had this really humble air about them. Like, as I was recording them, this doesn't directly answer your question, but maybe gives you an idea of their personality and character. When there was some magnificent act that it appears they prayed for and caused change, it's almost like when I was talking to them, they just kind of told the story so matter-of-factly and just almost brushed over the fact that they raised someone from the dead or that it was them who prayed for them. And it was just, it doesn't seem like their motivation to become famous or become a nationwide personality. They were just like, I'm here to do my job for the kingdom. How can I help God spread his word? So, when I would tell them, like, hey, this book is for Americans. We want to help Americans understand and maybe emulate what you do. How can we do it? They seemed ready and eager to share their wisdom. And they had such good wisdom. Just like, take a daily step of just trying to follow God's voice today. Just try that. And when you're wondering, why would I do this when there's so many other things to do in this world? One of the pastors just said, think about what will pass away and what remains, and then act on that.
Some of these guys you mentioned already, or most of them, were preachers, pastors. Did coming to you in lieu of what we've already discussed with the witch doctors and the other things that were going on, didn't that put some of them in danger by even being around you and talking to you?
I think they were probably, even though it did probably put them in danger, they were in way more danger doing their daily thing than they were with us in this group of pastors. We may have been the most safe that they normally were. The stories they talked about going into new villages, I'm not sure if they go every day or whatever, but it just gave me this picture of they are constantly up against violence, and they are ready every single day to do, so this is interesting. They're in the camp with us. I heard a story of spiritual warfare going on. So, like, one of the pastors told me, like I was asking him, how do you hear God? How do you know when to act and stuff? And he said that this isn't exactly dangerous, but it showed that there was some drama that they had to overcome. One of the pastors basically was real quiet and had decided that after this meeting here, visiting these other pastors and getting this training, I just don't have enough money. My wife wants me to stop this. I'm going to have to get out of the service, get out of the ministry. But then one of the other pastors, the one that I was interviewing, had a dream or somehow became aware that this guy was hiding this and basically confronted him and said, God wants you to stay in this. And the man's like, but I can't. I don't have enough money, or my wife wants me to stop. And he called him out on it, and he just said, God wants you to be in this. Trust. You can do this. And prayed for him. And in the mornings, we slept in the same dorms as these pastors, and it was wild. We woke up to hearing, this beautiful and intense prayer just echoing through the halls. These men were getting up early and praying for each other. I'm not sure if it was some sort of prayer of protection or just that's how they communicate with God, but they were getting at it early, starting it off, protecting themselves from the daily barrage of whatever they were going to come up against that day. So that was interesting to get a taste of that.
Now, tell the folks again, you mentioned that these interviews are not just told of in your book, Signs of a New Kingdom, but you also have links to where they can go online and see the videos of these interviews. Tell the folks again what that link is, would you?
Yes. So go to that same webpage where I want to funnel all of the traffic. Go there. It's rossboone.com and click on the link that says books. Scroll down until you see Signs of a New Kingdom and click on that, and that'll take you to my book page. And there in the flow of the page, you'll see, I believe, 6 or 7 video interviews. They're just dropped in from YouTube, and it's so interesting. You get to see these people up close and personal. You can't understand them except through the translator, so it's a little bit difficult to understand what they're saying unless you're really patient. But that's why I've gone through the transcription process and put it into this book. But it is powerful to see their faces and hear their voices and just see the humility and intensity in their eyes.
No disrespect to them intended with this one, but do you believe that the stories they told you were all true?
That's a really good question. That's really good. I've wondered that. And, I came to the conclusion that even if some of these stories were embellished or didn't come through correctly in translation, there are so many of them, 200 pages of these miracles, that I think that even if one of them was legit, or even part of some of them, it just means that God really is moving in this world. And, I read each of them with an open heart, open eyes, and just try to be sensitive in the spirit to say, God, what do I take away from this? What do you want me to learn? How can we help other people? Are you calling me to walk into a village and start preaching? I don't know, maybe not, but what do you want me to do? And so just using these stories as kind of a springboard to ask God, okay, maybe that's not for me. Who knows if it's completely 100% translated correctly or true or whatever. But what are you calling me to do because of this?
Now, you mentioned earlier that walking into Ethiopia, into that culture, was like going back in time. You said like going back to the New Testament era.
Yeah.
What did you learn? What can you use from these stories that you could apply to our modern world?
Yeah, and I asked the pastors that, and I think it comes down to the same thing. Just like they have struggles over there when they don't have enough water, and we get other gods that vie for our time. We have the choice every day of how we're going to devote our heart. Is it going to be for temporal things? Do I want a bigger following on Facebook and Instagram? I fall into that one. Or are we okay with whatever God wants to bring our way? So just understanding that, they have different struggles over there. Theirs are a lot more life-threatening, but honestly, we're talking about our souls here. And in both situations, we're living in either this earthly kingdom or planting seeds for a coming heavenly kingdom that's beginning to grow here on earth. So in that way, I think there's some carryover.
Obviously, the trip had an effect on you. Did any of this change your faith at all?
Oh, man, Doug, yeah. Now, I have to be honest, though. Right after the trip, I was so intense. Like, God, I just want to pray and see healing. How do I make this happen? How do I find you more? Blah, 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 blah. I want to do it. But it's so hard. I don't know if it's so easy to get lazy over here because there's so many comforts. But it's become, I've kind of slipped back in a lot of ways into my old way of doing things. I started a new project, a book about hearing and seeing God in America. How do we hear God's voice here in the developed world? And I started interviewing people here in America about their stories. And so it's coming together. There's, it'd be great if I can get that one published this year. But it's happening, honestly. There are people out here in America that, despite the comfort and despite the cultural resistance, are doing just as amazing things, or nearly as amazing things. The interviews for the new book are just blowing me away and inspire me. In fact, I talked to a friend last night, an old roommate of mine, who just moved to Nashville with a group of people who go on missions trips, and even in their location in Nashville are believing and causing miracles or facilitating God to cause miracles. And it's out there. It's really happening. And even just talking to him last night, I got a new inspiration to dive back in and dig in and see what God wants of me. And it was a beautiful moment. You know how God has these tender moments. He's like, hey, I know you're doing all right and you're happy and stuff, but I got to call you out. Are you really pursuing, Ross, what I mean for you to pursue? I want you back. And so it's a daily thing, Doug. Like, it's seasonal, like I'll drift away and then be inspired to be drawn back and call out for help and try to follow.
Well, do you, we're getting real short on time here. I want to ask you right quick, do you plan on going back?
Not right now. It's funny, though, because another friend I talked to yesterday was like, hey, Ross, this is weird, but I feel like maybe you're supposed to go to Africa. And I reminded him of this book, and I'm not sure if that's what it was, and this interview that was happening today. But, if there's a couple more proddings from God, then I'm open to it. I'm open to it. It doesn't fall into my normal mission, but we'll see what God has in store for me.
There you go. And folks, we are getting right up against the wall here time-wise. Ross, this has been tremendous. I hope there's nothing we've left out this morning. It's really been great being able to, well, thank you. It's been great talking to you. And listeners, I want you to look up this book, Signs of a New Kingdom by Ross Boone. And just look it up. It is a very inspirational read. You will enjoy it. And the interviews are available online. You'll enjoy those as well. So, folks, there you have it. You have been introduced to author Ross Boone. Now, I want you to be here next week for another interesting conversation. And remember, all the programs on Artist First are recorded and available in podcast form at the archives pages of artistfirst.com. So until then, for myself, I'm Doug Dahlgren, and for this guest, Ross Boone, and also for running the board back in Ohio, talented Scott Z, the Z-Man. For all of us, I say, take care of yourselves and each other. Read a book. If it's not one of Ross's, maybe you'll pick mine. And I'll see you all again in just 167 hours. Take care now.
We hope you've enjoyed this broadcast of the Doug Dahlgren Show on the Artist First Radio Network. Our theme music is composed by Mr. Wig Nelson. All past shows are available for free downloading. Visit the archive sections at artistfirst.com, and we'll see you next week.